and welcome to this week's edition of TRP News, a production of the United States Rational Progressive Party and therationalprogressive.com. I'm James Andre, and here's what's been happening this week. So, can Sanders win? As the first Democratic primary approaches in Iowa on February 1st, criticism of media coverage is rampant. One segment of the electorate where the resentment of media coverage is particularly strong is among Bernie Sanders supporters. Complaints range from a purported lack of coverage to the propagation of what they say is the false meme that Sanders can't win. Sanders supporters point to Clinton's so-called eroding poll numbers and his continued surge as evidence of a trend that can continue all the way to a primary victory. But to me, this is just more of the same kind of strange thinking that says both that we are ruled by a wealthy few, yet Sanders can win, and says that media refuses to cover Sanders, but look at all these polls and the media coverage of his amazing crowds. Frankly, it is all reminiscent of 2008 when Republicans refused to believe the polls and the obvious numbers. In fact, back then I wrote an article titled, "McCain Loses Because Campaign Can't Add." The article was about the McCain campaign doubling down on an election strategy that highlighted Pennsylvania, a state that any thorough analysis clearly showed he had no chance of winning. And of course, he didn't. Back then, I heard the same criticism of my analysis that we hear today of analysis of the Sanders campaign. There's still months to go. Look at the trends. He's gaining support. And you're just drinking the establishment Kool-Aid and trying to convince people that he can't win. And it's not true. He can win. So this is an issue many people are discussing right now, and I wanted to address it head on. So let me be clear. No, Sanders cannot win the Democratic primary. He can't. This is not bashing. This is not because I enjoy drinking Kool-Aid. This is not because I hate Bernie. And this has nothing more than just an analysis of the numbers. I know many people want to say, and more will tell me after this, that anything can happen. There's an urge to deny the possibility of predicting election outcomes. However, deny as much as you want, U.S. elections have become very predictable. People have said, but things are different now. Bernie is an outsider, and Obama. But as much as the idea of things being turned upside down appeals to some, that is not how things usually work. Uncertainty actually favors the status quo when it comes to elections. That's why when many are talking about the phenomenon of Barack Obama in 2008 and saying how the 2008 election was unprecedented, I was able to call the election in July, 4 months before anyone actually even voted. Back then I wrote, greater uncertainty means that precedent is likely to carry the most weight. Precedent says that anyone with Clinton's numbers will most likely be the nominee. So let's talk numbers. First, I see online a lot of general election thinking. We aren't talking about a general election, folks. We're talking about the Democratic primary, and that is an entirely different ballgame. For those of you comparing Sanders to Obama, I want to remind you, Obama lost the popular vote in 2008 in the primary. He lost. So you need to understand the Dem primary awards delegates on a proportional basis. So not only did Obama have to come close to Clinton in the popular vote, he then had to convince unassigned superdelegates to switch from supporting Clinton to supporting him. The other day someone told me, well, we don't care about establishment endorsements. And I just have to shake my head. As Nate Silver from 538 put it, Dems have a lot of superdelegates and few are going to vote for Sanders. That's just the way it is. Remember, in 2008, Clinton beat Obama in the number of votes but lost the primary. This year, Sanders is being crushed by those establishment endorsements. That means that he not only needs a resounding win in every state across the board, he has to convince those establishment parties' superdelegates, the same ones that sold out Clinton in 2008 for Obama, to switch their support to him. A socialist known for bashing the Democratic Party, who is a self-avowed socialist and is not even a member of the Democratic Party whose primary he's running in. It's not going to happen. In other words, even if Clinton gets only 45% of the popular vote across the board with superdelegates, she still can win the primary, just like Obama did in 2008. So this election, Clinton is Obama, not Sanders. So let's talk about how many votes Clinton is going to get. Does Sanders really stand a chance of taking the majority of states in the primary? No. Sanders supporters point to various bits of polling data regarding trustworthiness or honesty as indicators of a window Sanders can climb through to win the Democratic primary. But Clinton has consistently polled around 50% support for her nomination and leads Sanders by an average of 24 points consistently. Another thing many aren't saying, most of these polls include Vice President Joe Biden, as a potential candidate. In polls where Biden is not a candidate, Clinton's lead soars to 35 points and as high as 60 points. Now, we all know that it's early and polls are only a snapshot, but they do offer some insight, and we can see where the candidate's support is coming from. The latest CNN poll through August 16th says that of those that identify as Democrats, 88% have a favorable opinion of Hillary Clinton. 88%. When polled on individual issues like foreign policy and even Bernie's bailiwick of income inequality, Clinton is viewed as more capable of handling these issues. She wins. And when asked how the job Sanders might do would compare to the job Clinton would do, 64% said Sanders would be worse or no better than Clinton. So he does not win there either. Clinton is polling ahead when it comes to women and non-whites. In fact, the only demo Sanders is winning is white males. A poll of North Carolina out on the 19th shows Clinton over 60% with liberals, moderates, and African Americans, and over 50% with men, women, and voters within every age group. The point of all this is not that Clinton is preordained and the world's greatest candidate, or that Sanders is a terrible candidate with nothing to offer. The point is that Clinton has strong support across the board. While the level of that support may fluctuate or even diminish, realistically, it will never diminish enough for Sanders to take commanding leads. Clinton is a well-known entity with historical and deep base of support. That support is not going to be easily thrown over for an independent critical of the very party whose support he is seeking. With 5 months to go and an Iran deal to be made, a possible vote on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a fight over the shutdown of Guantanamo, and a government shutdown looming between now and the first primary, it is a near impossibility that Sanders will be able to flip the numbers enough to gain the nomination. That's just the way it is, folks. Sorry to tell you, that's just the numbers. So, speaking of the election, lots been going on, and I just want to talk a little bit about the question of, do Hillary Clinton's emails actually matter? And speaking of Clinton's polling numbers, there are those whose concern is growing over the potential impact of the email story on support for Clinton. There have been stories about Dem donors expressing concerns, and more recently, even rumors of Vice President Joe Biden entering the presidential race. Media outlets variously characterized the campaign as being on the defensive, scrambling to control damage, and one opinion even said the emails threatened to end her presidential bid. Every effort has been made by the partisans and the sensationalists to cast the situation in the worst light possible. The latest absurdity came when Clinton turned over her private server to the FBI. Despite the well-reported fact that Clinton fully intended to cooperate, and despite it being reported for months that the server had been wiped, the event was reported as though Clinton was forced to turn over her server against her wishes and had attempted to wipe it before being forced to turn it over. And while some in the establishment have concerns about the matter and the campaign's handling of the controversy, I happen to take the contrary position. The vast right-wing conspiracy has been doing everything it can to damage Clinton for more than the last 20 years. This is their MO. They will not stop operating by smear and innuendo. We saw it with Barack Obama back in 2008, and it will be no different with their longtime target, Hillary Clinton. But the evidence so far is that the majority of Americans don't care about Clinton's emails. It is my opinion that this issue is so irrelevant to most Americans, it actually serves as an excellent distraction to the opposition. While Republicans pander to their fringe and are forced to address the issue, Clinton is free to hit them on a variety of issues that many Americans do care about. Issues like education, voters' rights, climate change, and renewable energy. While Clinton talks about reforming student loans, Republicans will be talking about building border fences and bombing Iran. And while scandal mongers attempt to blow every ember into a forest fire, the evidence seems to support my contention that no one actually cares. Gallup out with numbers last Friday, the 21st. Hillary Clinton net favorables 60%. Gallup reports that, quote, Hillary Clinton remains the best liked among her party faithful. She enjoys a net favorable score of plus 60, which is essentially where she stood in July last month. Quote, Democrats' ratings of the Democratic presidential candidates' images have been highly stable. Clinton is the best-liked candidate running for president among the Democrats, as her steady, towering, net favorable score demonstrates. 60 is the net favorable, folks. That means that the total percent of those that view Clinton favorably in this Gallup poll from last Friday, 77%. So if you are a Bernie Sanders supporter and you made it this far into the video, here is one reason why I bother spending time explaining why he can't win. As I said, it's not because I don't like Bernie Sanders or don't think he has anything to offer, but it's just a matter of the numbers, and it's a matter of the energy of the campaign. Sanders is gaining a good deal of attention, but that is attention for himself, not the Democratic Party. And the conflict between his supporters and everyone else is sucking up a lot of energy. Now, I'm no Democrat, but I am a realist. For progressive, Democrats remain the best option for success so far. And Democrat candidates need that energy. I'm not talking about Clinton. I'm talking about down ballot. One thing you may not know is that there are a total of 34 Senate seats up for election in 2016. 34 seats. 24 of those seats are held by Republicans, the majority. These Senate races need attention and energy that many are devoting to a race, the presidential race, that is for all intents and purposes already over. Not only the Senate, but further down the ballot. I've talked many times about the Nader approach to political activism. That is, show up and point fingers every 4 years. People complain about the two-party system and the status quo, but last election, 37% of eligible voters showed up. And when it comes to everyday city, county, and state elections, very few independent or third-party candidates ever get elected to office. If you really want change, you need to start by changing the results at the local level. Meanwhile, the Koch brothers are well aware of the significance of the upcoming Senate races. Republican and Koch-affiliated PACs are already spending heavily to influence key races. Republican groups have already spent over $13 million in the upcoming election. That's 7 times more than the $1.9 million Republicans spent by this point last cycle. Many incumbents are being challenged in their primaries by Tea Party Republicans, including Senator John McCain of Arizona. These challenges have prompted support from establishment Republican PACs. While the Tea Party candidates are a serious challenge to established candidates like McCain, many do not poll strongly against their Democratic rivals for the Senate seats. The pace of spending so far this year means that it is likely several Senate campaigns will exceed $100 million spent before all is said and done. Approximately 16 seats are considered other than safe for the current party. Some of the key races will be in Florida, Illinois, Nevada, and Wisconsin. 34 seats facing election this cycle, so the odds are good that there's a Senate election in your state. So get informed on the situation where you live and find out what you need to do to elect someone that supports your political agenda. The drawing of legislative districts is again in the news as 2 states failed to come up with acceptable districts and had to turn the matter over to courts. Florida amended their constitution in 2010 with fair districting rules, and since then the legislature has tried in every way possible to avoid complying with the voter-approved constitutional amendment. Although the Florida House and Senate are both controlled by Republicans, they failed in their third and final attempt to come to an agreement on Florida's 27 congressional districts. The job of shaping the districts now falls to State Judge Terry Lewis, who has ordered hearings in September. Many view the legislative dysfunction as a preview of the October special session of the legislature, where they will attempt to draw Senate districts, which have also been rejected in court as unconstitutional. A third failed attempt to draw congressional districts in Virginia also sent the matter to courts. The Virginia Senate failed to come to an agreement and adjourned a special session without completing a new district map. The process got hung up over an interim state Supreme Court nominee Republicans were trying to oust, and the drawing of the state's 3rd congressional district, which is drawn to create a predominantly African American district. It is expected that the courts in both states will take submissions for proposed districts and appoint experts to create new maps. It's not for sure if these maps will be ready for the 2016 election, but I'm sure that's the goal. And in the Mediterranean over the weekend, more migrant rescues by the Italian military. Italy's Coast Guard rescued about 3,000 migrants after receiving distress calls from more than 20 overcrowded vessels drifting in the waters off of Libya. More than 104,000 migrants have landed at Italy's southern ports so far in 2015. Over 135,000 have landed in Greece since January. While Italy and Greece bear the brunt of migrants crossing the Mediterranean, some countries are increasing efforts to restrict their movements or prevent them from entering their countries at all. Hungary is completing a razor wire fence to prevent access to the thousands of migrants attempting to cross its border. The border of Hungary is the beginning of a zone in the European Union where people can travel throughout the EU without a passport. Hungary has registered more than 100,000 asylum seekers this year, compared with 43,000 the entire year 2014. And one of the ironies of anti-immigration tactics, in addition to the 109-mile-long fence, Hungary plans to increase penalties for illegal border crossing. The tougher laws will require that the country keep imprisoned for 4 years the very people they were previously trying to keep out. Many migrants attempting to reach Hungary from Greece first must pass through Macedonia. Last week, Macedonia sealed its border with Greece, firing tear gas and stun grenades to keep crowds of migrants at bay. More than 40,000 migrants have traveled through the country in the last 2 months. The government declared a state of emergency in 2 regions, lining the border with barbed wire. The confrontation between Macedonian police and military reached a head this past Saturday when thousands of migrants stormed across the border. Grenades and razor wire having failed, it now appears that the government is trying to move the migrants along as quickly as possible, organizing trains and buses. Migrants have been crossing into Macedonia at a rate of about 2,000 a day, going to Serbia, then Hungary, and Europe's borderless Schengen zone. Meanwhile, in Israel, a high court decision banning the government from holding migrants in detention for more than a year means the release of 1,200 African migrants. The migrants are to be freed, but forbidden from traveling to the industrial hub of Tel Aviv or the southern port city of Eilat. Tel Aviv has seen friction with residents opposed to the migrant presence. In recent years, an estimated 47,000 African migrants have managed to illegally enter Israel via Egypt, seeking jobs or asylum. The vast majority of African migrants are claiming asylum, and most come from Eritrea, Sudan, and the Congo. Israel has recognized fewer than 1% as asylum claims since 2009, less than 15% since 2009, the lowest rate in the Western world. And finally, last week, Monday, the 17th, marked the beginning of annual joint U.S. and South Korea military exercises. North Korea has repeatedly asked the UN Security Council to discuss the annual drills as it views them as an act of war. Relations have been particularly strained after Seoul accused Pyongyang of planting landmines that injured 2 South Korean soldiers earlier this month. After the landmine incident, South Korea restarted cross-border propaganda broadcasts via loudspeakers that had sat dormant for over a decade. North Korea responded with its own propaganda broadcasts. North Korea demanded an end to the propaganda and on Thursday fired artillery across the border, which some say may have been aimed at the broadcast equipment. South Korea returned fire. The U.S. briefly halted the joint exercise, which has since resumed. After 2 attacks blamed on Pyongyang killed 50 South Koreans in 2010, South Korea's military warned that any future North Korean attack could trigger strikes by South Korea that are 3 times as large. Last week's exchange of fire was the first between the 2 Koreas since last October, when North Korean soldiers approached the military border and did not retreat after the South Korea fired warning shots. The 2 sides then exchanged gunfire for about 10 minutes, and no one was injured. The 1950-53 Korean War ended with an armistice, not a peace treaty, leaving the Korean Peninsula still technically in a state of war. About 28,500 U.S. soldiers are deployed in South Korea to deter potential aggression from North Korea. And that is all for this week. Thank you for joining me. Thanks for watching. And once again, any questions or comments, please let me know in the comments below in the videos, or you can send us an email. There's links in the description of the video. And you can also catch us on Twitter or Facebook. And or don't forget to check out our site for other news, therationalprogressive.com. I'm James Andre, and thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you again next week.